using artificial intelligence to make your music both nutritious and delicious. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Siddharth Patil. He is the head director of data science listeners at Pandora, and Erik Schmidt, staff scientist at Pandora. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks. Thank you.
So what do each of you do at Pandora?
Let's go first. So I head the data science team for listeners. So any recommendations that we have to put forth in front of the user across any format, be it like a lean back radio experience, so you start a station, so we decide what song is going to play for you, any station, anytime, any moment, or even the on-demand experience. What are the playlists that you should get? What are the songs that should be part of those playlists? So any sort of recommendations work that happen at Pandora across any of our offerings, my team is actually responsible for those.
And I work on the machine learning and recommendation side, a bit more in the weeds. So on the machine learning side, we're focused on sort of content understanding. So how can we sort of build these machine learning systems that can understand genres, or what instruments are present in a piece of music, or what moods? And then the other side of it is sort of recommendation technology, which is how can we find the right songs to put in front of the listener at a given time.
Pandora was really groundbreaking when it launched, and certainly a lot has changed. How do you envision the future of digital music? I mean, what you call the Holy Grail?
It's a very loaded question. So, so let's see. So Pandora spent many years being becoming the leader in the lean back, personalized radio experience, right? But we understand now that listener habits have evolved. And we know now that the Holy Grail of digital music is not 100% lean back radio experience, but it's not certainly the other extreme, which is 100% on-demand experience. And the reason for that is because there's only so much music a listener can recall and curate themselves, right? There are only so many playlists that they can build themselves. Now we know that the Holy Grail of digital music is somewhere in between those two extremes, right? It's not 100% lean back, it's not 100% on demand. And a given listener at any given moment might be anywhere in that continuous spectrum from lean back to on demand. And so we're trying to bridge the gap between the two by designing lots of new features that will help our listener wherever they are in that spectrum. I can specify more about what we are doing to actually bridge that gap, if that would make sense. Okay, so for the lean back experience, a few months ago, we launched a really big feature called Premium Access. And what Premium Access does is that when we detect a very strong signal that an ad-supported radio listener is actually looking for something very specific, then we offer them a complimentary session to Pandora Premium, which is our on-demand offering, right? So we detect a very strong signal that what they need right now is the set of features that are actually part of our on-demand offering, which is Pandora Premium. So we give them access to 100% of our Pandora Premium after they watch a video ad. So this way, what we have done is we have taken this radio lean back listener and we have brought that experience slightly towards the center, right? And on the other side, which is sort of the lean-in experience, the on-demand experience, as I mentioned, for a listener, creating playlists is a lot of work, right? So we help the user do that, right? So there are lots of features we have designed for that. The most recent one is actually personalized playlists. And in personalized playlists, what we do is we use a battery of machine learning techniques and our proprietary music genome data. And we create playlists for you, which are hyper-personalized just for you from scratch, right? And the key here is that it's not just the content of the playlist that is personalized for you, the theme is also personalized for you. So Tonya, so you might get a playlist based on your listening called like your chill playlist. And I might get something like a heavy metal playlist. And Erik also might get a chill playlist based on his listening. But the songs in Erik's chill playlist might be quite different from the songs that are in your chill playlist because these are hyper-personalized for you. So So this way, we are actually taking the on-demand experience and sort of bringing it towards the center, because the user doesn't have to always go and curate their own music and build their own playlist. We'll do the work for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what were the first applications of algorithms in bringing music to the masses, and how has that changed?
That's a really great question. I think it's interesting how that played a role in sort of the music landscape, considering where Pandora started, right? Pandora started as a radio service, very different than a lot of the other music systems or services out there right now that started much later when you had on-demand licenses available. Pandora started at a time where they were trying to really change radio and take radio to sort of the next level with personalization. So because it's radio, it's interesting. It's almost like the product is the algorithm, right? You're coming to Pandora to actually consume the recommendations out of our recommendation system, right? This is different from like going to Amazon and they have some recommendations of other shoes you might want to look like or look at, right? You can search for exactly what you want, but with the radio streaming service, right, you're coming and you're telling us a genre, an artist, or a song that you like, but then sort of what we're having to do is provide this radio experience that follows that and is personalized to you with thumbs up and thumbs down. So there's a big challenge in here that we need to be able to pick songs to play for you on day one, right? So these aren't just like things we're going to show to you on the side and say, you might want to listen to this. This is something we're actually going to queue up and we're going to play for you. So there's a quality bar there that Pandora has had to be over with their recommendations from day one, really. And also Pandora started at a time in terms of collecting this data almost 18 years ago, right? So we didn't even really have the computing technology at that time to do some of the really awesome machine learning stuff that we can do with like analyzing audio signals and these types of things. And the fact is those are, the advances in that area are really based on having labeled examples, having humans tell us, this song is metal, or this song is blues, or this song is happy or sad. So at that time, really what they did is they started a process of human data collection called the Music Genome Project, where they brought together a team of world-class music experts to actually annotate each song on up to 450 different characteristics. And the founder of Pandora, Tim Westergren, he was a musician himself. And one of his goals was really to build this system that was unbiased, right? Where if you like an artist, we can show you another one that's just like it, musicologically, not biased by the crowd or what people like. It's, if you like this, let's find some other things just like that. And that spirit still lives in Pandora today, even with all the complex algorithms we have on top of that.
I think one key point to add is that, so when Pandora started, we started from the lean back radio extreme, right? Most other services actually started with a full-on on-demand service. So the other services, what they had to do was they had to ensure that if a user was asking for something very specific, then they had to play it. They had to find it very quickly in their library and they had to play it, right? Our job, Pandora's job when we started, because it was sort of a lean back radio service, our algorithms were our product, right? So it's true that Pandora has come slightly late to the on-demand game, but we also have a leg up in terms of the intersection of music and machine learning, right? Because that's how we started. We started at the intersection of music and machine learning. That's why I always tell my mom that Pandora is a machine learning company with music in our soul, right? Because that's how we started day one. So
is the Music Genome Project still driven by humans then, or have the machines taken over?
Well, the way we recommend music now is through an ensemble. We have an ensemble of over 75 different strategies that goes into every single spin that you hear on Pandora.
Yeah.
So these are sort of different categories, right? There are things like collective intelligence, which is like voting systems across different listeners. Things like collaborative filtering. Collaborative filtering models are things that would look at things that you thumbed up and down, and then look across our millions and millions of users, right? Hundreds of millions of users, and find people that are just like you, right? People that love the same things you love, hate the same things you hate, and show you some things that they love that you haven't heard yet, right? And then the third category is this sort of content-based, and that's where the MGP lives. So that's this data that has been annotated by human experts. And then that also lives alongside other types of content as well, like raw audio analysis or text analysis of what people are talking about on the internet, or the lyrics, etc.
So I think the key is that the Music Genome Project, yes, it has like over 1.5 million songs that have been hand annotated by these amazing artists at Pandora who care deeply about their craft, right? But that's what creates the ground truth data, right? That's what we know is very real. On top of that, we have sort of machine learning and deep learning algorithms, which take that ground truth data and apply it to the rest of the catalog, right? Because the catalog is like 60 million songs or whatever. And we need to annotate that too. But having this ground truth data from our music analysts enables our machine learning, in fact, actually deep learning techniques, to actually take that and expand it to our entire catalog. So yeah, so the magic happens because there is this harmony between machine learning and actually our artists who care deeply about their craft, the music analysts. Yeah.
Erik, you earned your PhD with a thesis focused on music emotion recognition. So how does machine infer emotion from music?
That is a complicated question. Well, I mean, the first question is like, where do we even look in a piece of music to find emotion? There's the musicological factors, things like lyrics, harmony, rhythm. There's also cultural signals too. Notions of similar artists that might be driven by the music industry or the artists themselves touring together, or maybe how you were exposed to that music. And then the other part is sort of like, we need to disentangle a listener's felt emotions from a performer's expressed emotions, right? A listener's felt emotions can be sort of very complex, right? You might react in a happy way to a sad song, right? People are very different in sort of how they interpret things. But we can make an assumption, right, that a performer themselves, they are trying to convey an emotion in a song that they are performing. So in my PhD, I focused explicitly on sort of the expressed emotions. And when we're looking here at Pandora of how do we sort of predict emotion of a song, we're first looking at, what was the intent of the performer with this? Given that, like, we want to develop these AI systems, right? Like you're talking about, we want the AI that understands emotion, human emotion, machine learning. And we want to be able to do this at the scale of tens of millions of tracks, right? Because that's the scale of these libraries at this point. And our ability to do that all really comes down to data. And that was one of my primary motivators to come here to Pandora, was this Music Genome Project. It's the most incredible data collection on music on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. They have annotated over 1.5 million tracks on up to 450 characteristics. This is a very time-consuming, arduous procedure, and it is very clean, high-quality data, which is extremely hard to come by, especially when I was on the academic side. We'd be using things like Amazon's Mechanical Turk, where you would pay people on the internet to annotate things for you, and they'd be just trying to game the system to get to their 25 cents as fast as possible. This is a whole other level. And I mean, with academic data sets, you're often talking about a few thousand tracks, if you're lucky, not 1.5 million. As Sid said before, right, this is sort of the ground truth, right? This is the thing we want to learn from this 18 years of work that then we can extend out to these tens of millions of tracks with machine learning. So the way I like to sort of explain how we do this, it's kind of a simple example. So most of the like big advances we've made in AI in the past decade have been in the area of what's called supervised machine learning. It's just learning from examples. So if we were trying to do something that everybody can understand, which is like classify dogs versus cats, right? The first thing we'd want to do is maybe take some measurements. And in machine learning, we call these features. Now, these features might be things like how tall is the animal or how long are their tails, right? And if you gave me a lot of these measurements across different animals, eventually I could have enough such that if you gave me the measurements for one that was unlabeled, I could predict, right? Cats are normally shorter, dogs are normally taller. Now, the quality of these systems, though, depends on two things. One, the measurements or the features, how intelligently are they crafted, right? There's certainly lots of tiny dogs out there, so we'd really need to think about what are we measuring? Is it informative? And then the other part is how much data do we actually have annotated? The more data, generally, the better. So this is sort of what we're building off of. Now, in audio, of course, the measurements get a little bit more complicated. What are we going to like pull out or extract from a raw audio signal? And a lot of the methods there started from sort of the speech community or speech recognition, which sort of focus on trying to understand or characterize somebody's vocal tract filter separate from the excitations that drive speech. And in music, essentially these sort of describe the timbre or the quality of the sound. Essentially the spectral envelope. I'm not going to go totally into detail on what we're doing there, but this is something that we studied sort of on the academic side. We even had human subjects listen to reconstructions of these things and found that they were actually still able to identify the emotion. And now at Pandora, with all of this data, we're doing a lot of this with deep learning systems like Sid talked about, where we're actually putting the raw audio signal into it.
Explain what it means then to strike a balance between exploring and exploiting. I mean, how does artificial intelligence know which mode you want it to operate?
That's an excellent question, by the way. So the CEO of a very large social media company said, I think that was Friday, and he said something like, it was in the context of how to rank their feed. And he said something like, now we understand that it should never be 100% algorithmic, right? And we understand what's behind it, right? So we realized a couple of years back that, so machine learning tends to be very greedy, right? So machine learning algorithms are very greedy in the sense that they'll keep trying to feed you what they are really sure that you really, really like, right? And so that's the problem that is happening with all these news feeds, that the algorithms know what you like and they'll just keep feeding you that same stuff. And that's what's deepening the rifts in the society and stuff like that, right? And to be honest, music is no different, right? So even in music, if we let the machine learning algorithms run wild, then what it would do is it would keep feeding you music that it's really, really sure that you're going to like, right? So that's going to lead to a lot of repetition, right? But we know that it's really, musical diversity is really important, right? Not just for the listener, but for the artist too. And so we need to strike a better balance between repetition and discovery. And internally, we call it delicious versus nutritious, right? And it's a phrase actually I stole from a friend. So, but it's really important because if we don't control it, then we are going to keep feeding delicious to our listener, and there'll hardly be any discovery. There'll hardly be any nutritious stuff, right? So we realized this a couple of years back, and we realized sort of the limitations of if you just let machine learning algorithms run wild, and that's what's going to happen. So we actually work really hard to actually ensure that we control repetition in a way that it doesn't spoil engagement either, right? It's a fine balance, right? It's always going to be ongoing work, as we are finding everywhere. It's always going to be ongoing, but it's always going to be on the top of our minds. Does that make sense? Sort of repetition versus discovery, and delicious versus nutritious.
I don't know. I like delicious, but I know I need nutritious. So.
But we also have a responsibility. One thing to add to that.
Yeah, because think about it, right? I mean, if we don't add the nutritious stuff, then especially some of the long tail artists, they'll probably never play, right?
Yeah.
So we have this responsibility to make sure that it's not just Drake that's going to play day in and day out. It's important that we give a platform to the smaller artists or the upcoming artists, right? And so that's why we have to strike the right balance.
Well, I won't ask you to do the Drake challenge then, because, you know, can you?
No.
No. All right. So what else is on your minds? I mean, where will your next projects take you, gentlemen?
So let's see. So I think it's the balance between repetition and discovery that's always going to be an ongoing project. Beyond that, we also understand that in a voice-first world, right? In a voice-first world, so right now, users are actually limited or constrained by their small screen on their phone. So they're restricted to thumbs and things like that, right? But in a voice-first world, we know that requests and feedback are going to be much more complex, right? And so instead of users actually requesting specific songs by specific artists, they can actually just tell you how they're feeling or who they are with or what they are doing or where they are, right? And the expectation might be that we have to play the right music for them, right? Based on these ambiguous requests.
I'm sad, cheer me up.
Yeah, right? Or I'm cooking, play me the right music. So it's very critical that we take our musical universe and map it into all these different emotions, all these different activities. So that's what personalized playlists were about. That's why we are mapping our music and emotions. We also had our soundtrack. So if you have 6 people in your family plan, then we actually create music, which is sort of an intersection of the taste of all 6 of you, or however many you have in your plan, right? So it's an intersection, so that if you're traveling in a car, if you're on a road trip and there are 4 of you, then we want to play the music that is right for all 4 of you, right? So these are definitely things that we think about a lot, especially given that the world is moving towards voice first. So.
Well, Siddharth and Erik, if somebody wants to connect with you, thanks so much for sharing and giving us some insight on what the magic behind Pandora is. If somebody wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
My Twitter handle is SIDP1897. My email is spatil@pandora.com. Those would be perfect. Yeah.
I am Erik M. Schmidt on Twitter. That's spelled ERIKMSCHMIDT. And I'm eschmidt@pandora.com.
All right. Thanks again, gentlemen. And if you guys want to follow me, you can. I'm right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe find me by going to tonyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.